The largest airborne operation in history begins on a Sunday, September 17th, 1944. The first Allied paratroopers and gliders descend in Holland in the early afternoon. Thousands of men land as many as 60 miles behind enemy lines, and despite the fact that the battle ahead would last 9 days, it was in the first vital hours of the operation that the outcome of the whole battle and the lives of thousands of soldiers and civilians on both sides would be decided. Last time, we saw how the Allied battle plan wasn't without its flaws, and how the Germans weren't as ill prepared as the Allied generals believed. And as the battle begins, the question we have to ask ourselves is, did the Allies make efficient use of the first vital hours of the operation? It's the middle of the day, and there's plenty of light, and despite a few accidents, no serious casualties are sustained on the drop. The element of surprise works in the Allies' favour. Taking advantage of the German confusion, most of the Allied objectives are taken quickly within a few hours. Most. The American 101st Airborne Division lands north of Eindhoven and secures most of its target bridges. But as the 2nd Battalion of the 506 Regiment, which included Easy Company from the Band of Brothers series, approached the bridge at Zonn, an 88 and nearby German sentries managed to delay the paratroopers long enough to blow the bridge. The Americans were just 50 metres from the bridge when it blew up in their faces. The 502nd Regiment fought their way through to the bridge at Best, which the Germans also managed to blow before it fell into American hands. So the 101st failed to capture a bridge on the canal at the southern end of their sector. 30 Corps can't cross a canal without a bridge, so when they eventually arrive, there's going to be delays while they build another one. And if that wasn't bad enough, a glider from the 101st Airborne crashed near Students headquarters, and plans for the entire Operation Market Garden, were in Students' hands by around 3 PM of the same day. Day 1. But the 101st weren't the only ones having trouble. The 82nd, landing near Nijmegen, did secure the heights at Groesbeek, the Homing Bridge and the bridge at Grave. Browning had also flown in and now set up his headquarters on the Groesbeek Heights. I'm mentioning that because Gavin and Browning had both decided that the Groesbeek Heights were the priority for the operation and had to be taken. And they were taken, because there were literally no Germans there. As a result, a good portion of the 82nd Airborne were just sat on the Groesbeek Heights, shelling the nearby woods, the Reichswald, because a sizable German counter-attacking force was believed to be in there. Time was ticking down to take what was the real priority, the road bridge at Nijmegen. Now, the 1st Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Shields Warren, had been ordered to take the Nijmegen bridge that day. However, Warren was first ordered to secure some of the suburbs in Nijmegen and prepare them for the defence, which took him most of the day. So early on, things weren't looking so good at Nijmegen either. If the 82nd failed to take the Nijmegen bridge, there's no way 30 Corps can build a bridge over the Waal. Nijmegen bridge has to be taken, but it isn't. At Arnhem, the British land in fields surrounded by woods. This works in their favour as it prevented the Germans seeing exactly what the British were up to, but it also didn't work in their favour as they were 8 to 13 miles away from their main objective, Arnhem Bridge. But General Urquhart had prepared for this, knowing that it would take several hours to fight their way through several miles of enemy-held territory. He decided to send 1st Airborne's reconnaissance squadron, supplied with jeeps, ahead. The idea was to send the jeeps to the Arnhem Road Bridge in a coup de main or surprise attack, then wait for reinforcements from the rest of the division to arrive. Neither trained to use them, nor were they meant to be used for anything other than reconnaissance, this lightly armed and unarmoured force wouldn't last long in a major firefight, but it might be able to slip behind enemy lines and may be able to get to the bridge quickly. However, Sepp Kraft's SS Training Replacement Battalion was one of the closest units to the British landing zones, and seeing that the paratroopers were landing, he decided to quickly form a blocking line near Wolfhaze and to scout out the British positions to gain vital information. Because observation was obscured by the trees, Kraft wasn't sure what the British were trying to achieve, but his line would cause the British some problems in those first vital hours. It was the northern end of this blocking line that the British reconnaissance squadron drove into, barely minutes after the line had been formed. The small force of jeeps was stopped by heavy machine gun fire and even a flamethrower attack. They then tried to advance by foot, but were driven back, and so the first attack towards Arnhem had failed. Fitch's 3rd Battalion marched along the Ultrazweg, south of most of Kraft's positions towards Arnhem. Unfortunately for Fitch, General Urquhart accompanied the battalion and basically slowed things down. Lieutenant Clemenson's platoon took out a German car, this one, and it was only after the war that they found out that it was General Friedrich Küssen, Arnhem's commandant, who had only just finished briefing Kraft on the situation. Despite this success, 3rd Battalion got embroiled in fighting Kraft's battalion, including an incident where General Urquhart himself was shot at by machine guns and mortar fire. Dobby's 1st Battalion was to take the route that started along the Ede-Arnhem Railway, but hearing reports of tanks ahead, Dobby chose to circle north of the route instead. This had the benefit of bypassing Kraft's blocking line, but he soon became caught in fighting in the wooded areas north of Wolfhaze. The German unit here was a hastily formed Kampfgruppe or battle group, which we will explain later, named after its commander, Weber. Consisting of 90 or so Luftwaffe signallers, and despite being poorly armed and inexperienced, they attacked the powers as best they could, and although they didn't do a lot of damage, they did cause a delay. To the south, Lieutenant Colonel John Frost's 2nd Battalion had been given the dual task of taking the Arnhem Rail Bridge and the main objective, the road bridge. Frost's men got into combat almost immediately, destroying a small column of vehicles, probably a reconnaissance company from Kraft's battalion, but was quick to get going towards the bridges. Bypassing the important Hevendorp ferry, which, although capable of transporting troops across the Rhine, was overlooked in the initial planning, they reached Oosterbeek by 6 PM and overwhelmed the token German resistance there. Detaching Lieutenant Barry's 9th Platoon, supported by the 8th Platoon, with orders to take the rail bridge, Barry led a section of 9 men onto the north end of the bridge itself. He thought he could take the entire bridge, but as he got to the centre of the bridge, above the water, the bridge exploded. Luckily, none of his men were killed by the explosion, but the rail bridge was destroyed. No matter, this wasn't the main objective. The main objective was the Arnhem Road Bridge. Now, it had taken 3 hours for 2 Pounder to get to this point. The German guards at the rail bridge had had plenty of time to prepare their explosives, so the chances of the road bridge being there when they got to it, they had to go on. Shortly before the destruction of the rail bridge, however, Field Marshal Model, German commander of Army Group B, fled his headquarters at the Hartenstein Hotel for fear of being captured. Interestingly, it's claimed that Model wrongly came to the conclusion that the British landed in Holland purely to capture him. There is no evidence of that, but it is true that he fled the hotel, and having assessed the situation at 17:30 hours, he and the staff of 2nd SS Panzer Corps issued the first and perhaps most important order to the German units in the Arnhem and Nijmegen areas. Immediate counterattacks were to take place, and 9th SS Panzer Division to concentrate against the British at Arnhem, and the 10th SS Panzer Division was to drive to Nijmegen, secure the bridges there and prevent any relief from getting to the British at Arnhem. At the same time, Student's 1st Volksjäger Army was to combat 30 Corps' advance in the Eindhoven area. This was a significant order. The Germans had decided to halt the relieving forces at Nijmegen. If they did that, the British at Arnhem would be trapped miles behind enemy lines and doomed. At 1800 hours, Kraft suspected that he'd been outflanked. He had. Fearing the possibility of encirclement, he withdrew his force, which in turn allowed elements of 3rd Battalion to continue towards the bridge. Having delayed 3rd Para, Kraft's force retreated to the Dreyensweg and helped reinforce a new battle group that had been hastily set up there, Kampfgruppe Spindler. The Germans were practicing a new type of unit organisation called Kampfgruppen. This was an ad hoc formation which could be created or disbanded depending on circumstances. It's basically a makeshift unit which is usually cobbled together with bits from other units and then given a leader and a task. Experienced and decorated in both the Iron Cross and the German Cross in gold, SS Lieutenant Colonel Spindler, commander of the 9th SS Panzer Division's artillery regiment, pulled in as many units under his command as possible. Even units without guns, but he managed by the evening of the 17th to assemble a force of infantry, half-tracks and self-propelled guns, and possibly even some tank destroyers and Mark IV tanks. He decided, perhaps off his own initiative, to form a blocking line to prevent the British from getting to the centre of Arnhem. Spindler is a very significant figure in this operation, who we will see again and again as the battle progresses. Frost and 2nd Battalion were lucky enough to bypass Spindler's line before it solidified. Following the bend of the Rhine, and despite having to detach a company to deal with the machine guns at Den Brink, 2nd Battalion marched into Arnhem. As they moved through the streets, German vehicles screeched across Arnhem road bridge heading south. Commanded by SS Captain Victor Grabner, the 9th SS Reconnaissance Battalion headed towards Nijmegen. Victor Grabner was another significant figure at Arnhem, and we'll return to him again next time. The point is that only a handful of guards were guarding Arnhem Bridge. Frost reached the bridge at about 8 o'clock, following shortly by 1st Brigade headquarters. They had covered 7 or 8 miles in about 5 hours. The bridge guards were in a pillbox on the bridge itself, so 2 para dug into positions beneath the bridge and waited for 3rd Battalion and the reconnaissance squadron, which ominously hadn't arrived. That's because, facing Kampfgruppe Spindler's determined defensive line, 3rd Battalion had decided to dig in near Oosterbeek, and no further progress was made that evening. Only C Company, which had gone north of Kraft's position, managed to fight their way to the bridge after a violent clash in Arnhem itself, resulting in only 40 or 45 men from reaching Frost's position. 1st Battalion's commander, Dobby, received word via radio that 2nd Battalion had reached the bridge and needed reinforcements. He decided to abandon the idea of fighting to reach the northern end of Arnhem and just get to the bridge. He turned south and fought throughout the night, losing over 100 men, and only got halfway to their objective before, well, they were stopped by Kampfgruppe Spindler. Spindler had stopped 2 of the 3 battalions from getting to Arnhem Road Bridge on day 1, and his achievement is even more admirable when you consider that his force hadn't existed that morning. By the evening of the 17th, another Kampfgruppe named Harder, after its commander, who was, to slightly complicate things, was under the command of Spindler, moved into Western Arnhem and cut Frost's troops off from the rest of 1st Airborne. There was now no way that any other British paratroopers would get into Arnhem that evening. In all, around 750 men reached the road bridge in Arnhem, almost all of 2nd Battalion, a 45-man unit from 3rd Battalion, Brigade HQ, as well as a few more men from other smaller units, and yeah, they'd made it. They were now surrounded, and they had only limited stocks of food and ammunition. They'd gone unnoticed by the 20 or so Germans manning the pillbox on the bridge, and a couple of attempts to knock it out had failed. A 6-pounder and a flamethrower were brought up and took it out. Missing the bunker, the flamethrower actually hit the ammunition and petrol storage hut behind the pillbox, and a large explosion covered the bridge in flame that would burn throughout the night. Later, a convoy of German lorries carrying ammunition supplies attempted to cross the burning bridge. Yeah, the flames exploded the ammunition that they carried, and this only added to the inferno. Another convoy, a V2 rocket unit, was also ambushed on the Arnhem side, and several men were taken prisoner, although the British didn't realise they were V2 rocket operators, which meant that the V2 rocket operators survived the battle. But overall, part of the British paratrooper force was at the bridge, and they just had to wait for relief by 30 Corps. So where were the tanks? 30 Corps had to go, 13 miles between their start point and the city of Eindhoven. Between Eindhoven and them was the German front line. After an artillery bombardment, German infantry and guns hit them from the woods on either side of the road, brewing up 9 tanks in the immediate ambush. The British deployed infantry and Typhoons from the RAF to deal with the Germans, and the infantry went in to clear the enemy positions, finally allowing 30 Corps to continue. By this point, the Germans were reacting to the attack, sending in 5 battalions to try and halt the advance. The whole day was spent fighting one new regiment after another that the British intelligence officers were even surprised existed. And by this point of the day, 30 Corps had only gone 8 miles from their starting point. There were another 56 miles to go to Arnhem, a bridge to build at Son, and many more Germans between them. At least all the bridges were taken on day 1, and those that weren't could be rebuilt, except for one. Nijmegen Bridge was still in enemy hands, and the 82nd Airborne had yet to make an attack on it. Finally, at 8 PM, Warren was able to send 2 rifle companies from the 1st Battalion towards the bridge. A and B companies attacked into Nijmegen, but B company got lost along the way, so A company went on alone. Yeah, only one company was attacking one of the main objectives in the entire operation, and it was many hours after the paratroopers had landed. As they approached the bridge, which at this point was still only guarded by a handful of Germans, a German convoy of reinforcements from the north arrived, and an entire infantry battalion from the 10th SS Panzer Division, supported by a company of engineers and Victor Grabner's reconnaissance battalion from 9th SS Panzer, arrived. The fighting began, but it was heavily in the Germans' favour. B Company arrived later in the night, but they too found the situation hopeless. The Americans did manage to capture and destroy the firing mechanism for the bridge, meaning the Germans weren't able to blow the bridge. Not they were planning to anyway, but they were outgunned and outnumbered now. The Germans even managed to counterattack and surround the unit in the post office, who would stay there for the next 3 days. We can safely say that the 82nd had failed to capture Nijmegen Bridge. The entire operation depending on the capture of every bridge. Son had been destroyed, but since it was over a canal, a Bailey Bridge could be built in a matter of hours to replace it. But the bridge at Nijmegen spanned a much larger body of water, and a Bailey Bridge couldn't be built over that. Nijmegen Bridge had to be taken on the first day, and it wasn't. So things don't bode well for Operation Market Garden at this early stage, but there is still hope. If 1st Airborne could fight their way to Frost at the bridge, or if 30 Corps could make good their delay and reach and repair Son Bridge quickly, or if the 82nd could somehow capture Nijmegen Road Bridge, which at this point is still a possibility, the battle could be won and the war over by Christmas. The question is though, did the Allies make efficient use of the first vital hours of the operation, and who made the worst mistakes at this early stage? Let me know who you think it was in the comments below. We'll continue this fight tomorrow, but before we leave, it's worth mentioning SS Captain Victor Grabner one more time. This guy went everywhere on the 17th. First, he had a Knight's Cross pinned to his chest by Divisional Commander Hartzer early on the 17th, unlike what Wikipedia says, which is why we don't rely on it. Grabner sent units to scout out positions along the Eid-Arnhem road. He fought elements of 1st Battalion, and then he drove across the Arnhem Bridge at about 6 o'clock. An hour or two before Frostmen even reached it. At 7 he was at Elst, south of Arnhem, and finding no paratroopers there, he raced to Nijmegen and found no Americans at Nijmegen either. Yet, within 24 hours of this picture being taken, Grabner was dead. We'll find out why tomorrow. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, bye for now.